The passenger who knew too much. It started like any other night. I had just finished a late shift at the diner and was tired, my feet aching from standing for 10 hours straight. The streets were quiet, almost unnaturally so, with the occasional car gliding past like a ghost. I opened the Uber app and requested a ride home, grateful that I wouldn't have to wait in the cold. A car appeared within minutes, a black sedan with tinted windows. Nothing unusual at first glance. The driver greeted me politely, his smile calm, almost too calm. "Where to?" he asked. I gave my address, and he nodded. As we merged into the night traffic, I couldn't shake a weird feeling. Something about him was off, though I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was the silence that hung in the car, thick and heavy, only broken by the faint hum of the engine. Then he started talking. "I know where you live," he said casually, glancing at me through the rearview mirror. My stomach dropped. I laughed nervously, assuming he was joking. Yeah, that's literally why I'm telling you my address," I replied. He didn't laugh. Instead, he smirked, leaning back in his seat as if he had all the time in the world. "You're lying to yourself if you think I don't know more than that." My heart started racing. I looked at my phone, debating whether to call someone, but I was on the highway now. There was no easy way to escape, and the car's tinted windows made me feel trapped, isolated. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He chuckled, a low, almost sinister sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. "I know where you were last week. I know who you were with. I know the little things you think nobody notices. You might think it's just a coincidence that I'm here now, but it's not. I've been following your routine for a while." I froze. My mind raced. I had posted a few photos on social media over the last week, nothing personal, just normal stuff. But I realized he could have pieced it together. How did he know my patterns, my friends' names, my favorite coffee shop? Every small detail I had thought was private suddenly felt exposed. "Look, I don't know what your deal is, but you need to take me home. And that's it," I said, trying to mask my fear. My voice shook despite my attempt to sound confident. He tilted his head, like he was genuinely considering something, and then said quietly, almost to himself, "You're scared. That's good. Fear is honest. Fear tells me everything I need to know." The rest of the ride was silent, but it wasn't the comfortable silence you get from familiarity. It was oppressive, heavy like the car itself was breathing. Every time I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, he was watching me, eyes sharp, calculating. I kept my hands on my lap, avoiding sudden movements, hoping to appear calm. As we approached my street, I noticed something even stranger. He slowed down, then sped up, then slowed again as if he were testing me. My house was just up ahead, the lights warm and inviting, but the closer we got, the more my sense of dread grew. I didn't know whether I was relieved that the ride was almost over, or terrified of what might happen when we stopped. Finally, we pulled up in front of my house. I reached for the door handle as if every second the car stayed moving was a threat. He didn't move. "You made it," he said softly, almost kindly, but there was something menacing under the surface, a promise I didn't want to understand. I hurried out, my keys trembling in my hand. As I slammed the door behind me, I heard the engine start again. I peeked through the blinds and saw the black sedan slowly driving past, turning the corner, disappearing into the night. My relief was immediate, but it was short-lived. I realized that he had known too much. Not just about my daily routine or where I went, but about me. The feeling that someone could watch your life, track your every movement, and wait for the right moment was suffocating. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house, every shadow outside the window made my heart race. I kept checking my social media, my accounts, even my phone settings, trying to find any trace of how he knew so much. There was nothing obvious, no hacked accounts, no unfamiliar logins, nothing but the memory of his voice. The cold precision in his words haunted me. Days later, I tried to convince myself it was a one-time scare, a twisted coincidence. But every time a car slowed down near my house, I felt my pulse spike. Every notification on my phone made me jump. I realized that the worst part wasn't that he had known where I lived, it was that he could know anything. The idea that a stranger could be tracking the smallest details of my life, patient and silent, waiting for the right moment, was worse than any direct threat. Weeks passed, and life returned to a semblance of normalcy, but I never called another Uber alone at night. I took different routes, changed routines, deleted most of my social media, and every night before I fell asleep I wondered if he ever knew, if he was still out there, observing, remembering. The passenger who knew too much had left no trace, but the terror that stayed with me long after the ride ended. It wasn't a horror story from a movie or a news headline. It was real, happening in the quiet moments of my life when I least expected it. And sometimes, when I hear a car slowly approach, I can't help but imagine him behind the wheel smiling that same calm, too calm smile. Riding with a stranger who wasn't alone. It was around midnight when I requested an Uber to get home after a late night at work. The streets were quiet, mostly empty except for the occasional streetlight flickering, casting long, wavering shadows. I was tired, mentally drained, and ready to crawl into bed. The app showed a car arriving in 3 minutes, a gray SUV with slightly cracked windows. Nothing about it seemed alarming. The driver, a tall man with dark hair and an unsettlingly calm demeanor, greeted me with a nod. "Where to?" he asked in a soft, almost rehearsed voice. I gave him my address and got in, trying not to appear nervous. The moment the door closed, I felt a strange chill in the air, like the car itself was unusually cold. At first, the ride seemed normal. He drove silently, occasionally glancing at me through the rearview mirror. Then, after a few minutes, he spoke. "You know, I usually drive alone, but tonight I have company." I laughed nervously, thinking he meant a friend in the back seat. But when I glanced at the rear, the seat was empty. I asked your passenger, and he just smiled. A slow, unnerving smile. "Oh, they're quiet," he said. Unease began to settle in my stomach. The silence in the car was heavy, and the idea that someone or something was sharing this ride with me without being visible made my skin crawl. I wanted to make a joke, say something to lighten the mood, but the words died in my throat. Then I felt it. A faint, almost imperceptible pressure on the seat behind me, like someone had just shifted. I spun around quickly. Nothing. The seat was empty. My heart started racing and my hands gripped the seat tightly. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe fatigue was making me hallucinate, but the feeling didn't go away. "Don't worry," the driver said calmly, as if reading my thoughts. "They won't hurt you, they just watch." My blood ran cold. I didn't understand what he meant, but I knew immediately that this was not normal. "Watch who?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned back and focused on the road. But I could feel his eyes on me in a way that felt predatory. As we drove through the dark streets, the sense of being watched grew stronger. The pressure behind me shifted again slightly, like a breath of cold air brushing against my neck. I couldn't turn my head anymore. The fear rooted me in place. I was trapped, the tinted windows making escape impossible without his cooperation. Then he started talking about the past details I hadn't shared with anyone. "You were out late last Friday, weren't you? At the gas station by Elm Street. I saw you there." I froze. How could he know that? I hadn't told anyone. I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. "There are cameras there," I said weakly. He shook his head. "No cameras would show you what I saw. That's different. I'm always watching, you see. They are too." "They?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "They're quiet. They like to stay in the shadows. You can't see them, but they're here. They always are." My stomach turned, and I felt bile rise in my throat. This wasn't a story, a harmless joke, or a creepy urban legend. This was happening. The SUV felt alive, like a vessel for something unseen, something sinister. The pressure in the back seat seemed to grow heavier, like the presence behind me had shifted closer. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed at me to get out, but we were still 10 minutes from my apartment. The driver finally broke the silence again. "Some people see them and don't survive. Others just go mad. You seem smart enough to notice, though. That's why you're still here." I didn't respond. I just gripped the edge of the seat, sweat pouring down my back despite the chill. I tried to focus on the streetlights, on anything tangible, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. It was suffocating. My mind raced if I screamed. Would anyone hear me? Would they believe me if I tried to tell someone what was happening? Then I saw it. Or rather, I felt it. A shadow shifted in the back seat. It was faint, like a smudge of darkness, but it was there. I blinked, hoping it was my imagination, but when I looked again, the shadow seemed to lean closer, almost curious, stretching just above the seat. I could feel a coldness in the air, a kind of emptiness that pressed against my back. The driver didn't react. He kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. "Don't be afraid," he said quietly. "They just like to ride with the living. They like to see how it feels sometimes. They watch you because they can. That's all." My hands shook as I tried to hold my phone. I thought about calling 911, but I feared that the moment I made a sound, the presence in the back seat would move, strike, or somehow trap me permanently. The minutes stretched on, each second like an eternity. Every turn, every passing streetlight felt like a countdown. Finally, we pulled up outside my apartment building. I didn't wait for him to unlock the door or help me out. I opened the door and bolted into the lobby, heart hammering in my chest. I glanced back once. The SUV was still there, the driver's silhouette calm, almost friendly in the darkened interior. But the shadow in the back seat, it was gone. I told myself it was over. I was safe. I hurried into my apartment, locked the door, and sat in silence for hours, listening for any sound that might indicate they had followed me. Every creak, every gust of wind made me jump. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something had been in the car with me and had only left because the driver allowed it. That night, sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faint shadow moving in the back seat, bending, stretching, just out of reach. I kept imagining eyes, countless dark eyes, watching me even now. Even in the safety of my own apartment, I felt that presence lingering, patient, and silent. Days later, I realized I couldn't take Uber rides alone at night anymore. I changed my schedule, avoided late shifts, and told friends to accompany me whenever I had to travel. But it didn't matter. The fear stayed with me, the knowledge that something unseen could ride silently with me, that it was patient enough to wait for the perfect moment, was terrifying. Sometimes, when I hear a car door slam or a vehicle slow down outside, my stomach drops. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I can feel a faint, cold pressure behind me, as if they never really left. Riding with a stranger who wasn't alone had shown me the kind of fear that doesn't end when the ride does. It lingers, grows, and waits, always waiting. The Uber that disappeared into nowhere. It was a rainy Thursday night when I requested an Uber after leaving a late meeting downtown. The streets were slick with water reflecting the dim glow of the streetlights. I remember thinking how peaceful it was, almost too peaceful, as if the city had gone completely silent just for me. My phone buzzed. It had found a nearby car, an older silver sedan with slightly fogged windows. The driver's name was Mark. He seemed friendly at first, a small, polite smile greeting me as I got into the back seat. "Where to?" he asked. I gave him my address and leaned back, ready to escape into the warmth of my apartment after the long day. The rain tapped steadily on the roof, a comforting rhythm, but something about his eyes felt strange calm, yet with an intensity that made my stomach knot. We merged into traffic, and at first everything seemed normal. He chatted about the weather, small talk about the city, but then I noticed something odd. Instead of taking the familiar route, he turned down streets I didn't recognize. Streets that were narrower, darker, and completely deserted. This isn't the usual route," I said cautiously, trying to sound casual. Mark didn't answer immediately. His hand stayed on the wheel, steady, but his eyes flicked to me in the rearview mirror. "Sometimes the long way is more interesting," he said softly, almost dreamlike. I laughed nervously, but the sound didn't reach my ears the way I expected. It felt hollow, swallowed by the thick silence that had settled over the car. Minutes passed, and the streets got stranger. Streetlights became sparse, and eventually, the glow of the city disappeared entirely. I checked my phone. No signal. My heart started pounding. I tried to call someone, anyone, but the call wouldn't connect. Panic crept in, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had to think. "Where are we?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He smiled, but it wasn't friendly anymore. It was that same strange, unsettling smile, the kind that promises something you don't want to experience. "We're on a road not everyone sees. Some people get lost here, some never come back." I felt my throat tighten. My hands gripped the edge of the seat, nails digging into the fabric. "Please, just take me home," I whispered, my voice trembling. He didn't respond. Instead, he continued driving, and I realized with growing horror that the familiar city had vanished. There were no signs, no buildings, nothing, only darkness, broken by the occasional flicker of a street lamp that seemed like it existed in a different time, in a place that shouldn't exist. Then I noticed it. The GPS on my phone was acting weird. The little blue dot that usually represented my location was gone. The map itself seemed distorted, lines and roads bending strangely, as if the city had been erased. I tapped the screen frantically. Nothing. The car was moving, but I had no sense of direction, no sense of how far we traveled. Mark spoke again, his voice calm and almost hypnotic. "Don't worry, you'll get home eventually, but first we have to take the scenic route." "Scenic route?" I whispered, my heart hammering. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I was trapped. The car's doors were locked. The windows, fogged and slightly tinted, reflected my wide-eyed panic back at me. Hours seemed to pass, though it could have been minutes. The streets remained empty, unfamiliar, and increasingly surreal. Shadows flickered along the edges of the road, shapes that didn't belong, impossible figures just out of the corner of my eye. I tried to tell myself they were tricks of the rain, the fog, my imagination, but the pressure in the car grew, thick and oppressive, as if the air itself had weight. Finally, I reached a place that looked like nothing I'd ever seen before. There were no street signs, no buildings, not even streetlights, just a long, dark stretch of road that seemed to vanish into a black void. I realized then that I couldn't even see the end of the road. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream, but the sound got caught in my throat. Mark glanced at me, his calm demeanor unchanged. "Almost there," he said. "Just a little further, and then you'll be gone." "Gone?" I croaked. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of the impossible. I wanted to leap out of the car, but the doors wouldn't budge. The windows wouldn't roll down. I was completely trapped. Suddenly, the road ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, the darkness swallowing the headlights' glow. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, everything changed. The car lurched forward into a place that was blank, a void of nothingness, silent, motionless. I could feel my stomach drop, as if the ground beneath us had disappeared entirely. Mark turned toward me, and for the first time his friendly mask cracked. His eyes were black, empty, voids that seemed to reach inside me. "This is where most people end up," he said softly. "Forever between here and there." I screamed, pounding on the doors. "Let me out," I yelled, tears streaming down my face, but my voice was swallowed by the void. The car didn't slow, didn't stop. The world outside had vanished completely. I could see nothing, hear nothing, except the faint hum of the engine and the icy grip of dread. Then, without warning, everything shifted. I blinked and suddenly I was outside the car. The streets were normal again. Rain pattered on the asphalt, cars passed by, lights flickering. I was standing alone, drenched, my heart racing, the Uber nowhere in sight. My phone buzzed, still no messages, no missed calls, no trace of the ride. I never saw Mark again. I never saw the car. It was as if it had never existed. But I know it did. I can still feel the memory of that endless road, the suffocating darkness, the weight of being trapped somewhere that shouldn't exist. I can still remember his eyes, the voids that seemed to look right through me. Since that night, I avoid Uber and ride shares entirely. I take taxis only when necessary, always in daylight, always with familiar drivers. And sometimes, when it rains, when the streets are quiet and empty, I swear I see a silver sedan in the distance, lights flickering, watching, waiting. The Uber that disappeared into nowhere wasn't just a ride. It was a glimpse into something beyond comprehension, a place where reality folds, and no one is safe. And sometimes, I wonder if the next ride I take might take me there again. Late night ride turns deadly. It was just past 2 a.m. when I requested an Uber after leaving a friend's birthday party. The streets were eerily quiet, slick from an earlier drizzle, with only the occasional neon sign flickering in the darkness. I was tired, tipsy, and ready to collapse into bed, so I didn't pay much attention to the driver's profile, just hit accept and climbed into the car when it arrived. The driver was an older man, mid-50s perhaps, with graying hair and a calm demeanor. His smile was polite, reassuring. "Where to?" he asked. I gave him my address, leaned back in my seat, and tried to relax. The first few minutes were ordinary. He talked about the weather, small local events, even complimented my shoes. I laughed nervously, thinking I was just glad someone was keeping me company on the lonely ride home. Then the road we took became unfamiliar. He didn't follow the usual route, instead weaving through narrow streets lined with shuttered shops and dark alleys. "Do you always take this way?" I asked. Sometimes he replied casually, but there was a note in his voice that made my stomach tighten. "It's faster sometimes, safer sometimes not." I laughed nervously, trying to mask my unease, but a creeping feeling told me that I had made a mistake. The streets grew darker and emptier, streetlights were scarce, and the occasional flicker of one gave the world an uneven, stuttering glow. I tried to glance at my phone's GPS to make sure we were on the right path, but the signal was weak and the map froze. The little blue dot suspended mid-motion. Something shifted in the air. It started as a subtle tension, a vibration I felt through the seat beneath me. Then I heard a faint, almost imperceptible tapping from the back seat. My heart jumped. "Hello?" I asked cautiously, but there was no reply. The driver glanced at me, briefly, through the mirror, his expression unreadable. "They like it when passengers notice," he said softly. "It makes the ride more enjoyable." "Who?" I whispered, gripping the seat handle. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned down an alley that was darker than the rest, so narrow that the sides of the SUV scraped against the walls. My pulse raced, panic surged, and for the first time I realized I was utterly trapped. Then I felt it. Something shifted behind me. A weight, a cold presence, pressing against the back seat. I twisted in my seat, but the tinted windows prevented me from seeing anything outside, and the rearview mirror reflected only darkness. I tried to remain calm, rationalizing that it was my imagination, my exhaustion, but the pressure didn't relent. It pressed closer, like an invisible hand or a mass of shadows. I think I want to get out," I stammered, voice trembling. The driver's smile widened. "Too late for that," he said, almost playfully. "We're nearly there." "Where?" I demanded. "What are you talking about?" He didn't respond. Instead, he accelerated, taking the SUV down a long stretch of road that seemed to stretch endlessly into the night. I realized then that I had no landmarks, no signs, no familiar points of reference. The world outside had become alien, a surreal stretch of black asphalt and empty streetlights, and I had no idea where we were. The tapping from the back seat became louder, more deliberate. I could feel movement, shifting, as if something or someone was rearranging itself just behind me. My stomach churned, bile rising, as I understood the horrifying truth I wasn't alone. Please, please let me out, I begged, pounding on the doors. Nothing. The doors wouldn't unlock. The windows wouldn't roll down. I was trapped with whatever lurked behind me and the driver, who seemed complicit. "You'll be fine," he said softly. "Just stay still. Don't fight them." "Stay still?" I shouted, terrified. "What the hell are you talking about?" Then I heard it, a low, wet, rasping sound from the back seat. It was inhuman, guttural, like something breathing heavily just beyond my reach. My stomach dropped. I could feel the weight behind me pressing harder, like it was testing me, assessing my fear. I tried to calm my racing mind, but each second stretched into eternity. The driver glanced at me, eyes cold now. "They like it when you resist," he said. "It makes the hunt more thrilling." "Hunt?" I whispered, my voice cracking. The full horror of the situation hit me. This wasn't a simple late-night ride home. It wasn't a detour. This was deliberate. They, the unseen, malevolent presence, were here for me, and he was guiding them. The SUV lurched, tires squealing slightly on the wet pavement. I realized we weren't heading toward any known streets. We were going somewhere else entirely, somewhere hidden from the world, somewhere I couldn't escape. The shadows behind me pressed closer. I could feel a coldness seeping into my bones, a creeping numbness that made my fingers stiff, my legs unresponsive, and then the tapping stopped. Silence. For a brief moment, I dared to breathe, but the driver turned to me slowly, his expression serene, almost satisfied. "They're ready," he said. "Soon you'll understand." I wanted to scream, to fight, to jump out of the car, even if it meant certain death. But the SUV had slowed, the darkness outside pressing against the windows like liquid, and I realized with growing terror that the end was inevitable. I don't remember how long the ride lasted after that. Time distorted, seconds stretching into hours. The shadows moved, always just behind me, whispering my name in voices that were not human. I was aware only of their presence, of the cold, suffocating dread that filled the car, and the driver's calm, unyielding control. Finally, when I blinked, I was outside the car, standing on an empty street. The rain had stopped. The lights flickered normally. The SUV was gone. The driver, Mark, was gone. No trace of either remained. My phone had full service again, but there were no calls, no messages, no explanation. I made it home safely, but the fear never left me. I stopped taking rides at night, avoided Uber entirely, and checked my surroundings obsessively whenever I walked alone. Sometimes when the streets are quiet and the city seems empty, I swear I can feel that same cold presence, the faint tapping behind me, testing, waiting, hunting. Late-night rides aren't just about getting from one place to another. Sometimes they are a doorway. A doorway to a nightmare where reality bends, where unseen forces lurk in the back seat, and where one wrong choice, one Uber ride can turn deadly. The driver who watched me sleep. It was past 1 a.m. when I finally left the office after working late on a project. My body was exhausted, my mind foggy, and the thought of crawling into bed made me weak with relief. I opened the Uber app, requested a ride, and within minutes a black SUV pulled up outside the building. Its windows were tinted heavily, and the car's glossy exterior reflected the streetlights in long, distorted streaks. The driver, a middle-aged man with graying hair and an unnerving calmness, greeted me politely. "Going home?" he asked. I nodded and slid into the back seat, hoping to relax on the short drive. At first he spoke casually, asking about the weather, joking lightly about the city's nightlife. His voice was soft, almost soothing, and I let my tension ease a little. The ride started normally, and I found myself leaning against the window, eyes heavy from exhaustion. Within minutes, sleep began to creep in, despite the lingering unease that I couldn't shake. The streetlights outside blurred as my eyelids drooped. I tried to fight it, but the warmth of the seat and the monotony of the quiet ride overpowered me. Soon, I slipped into a light sleep, or at least I thought I did. Then I felt it a presence. Not just the driver, but something more focused, more deliberate. I blinked, half awake, and caught a glimpse of him in the rearview mirror. His head was turned slightly, eyes glinting in the dim light, staring at me with an intensity that made my chest tighten. My mind, still fuzzy from fatigue, tried to rationalize it. He's just checking the road, I told myself. But the feeling didn't dissipate. I drifted again, sleep pulling me under, and a strange awareness tugged at me. I could feel his gaze, unbroken, unwavering, even as my body surrendered to exhaustion. I tried to shift my position subtly, hoping he wouldn't notice. But the weight of his attention was heavy, suffocating. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined him watching, analyzing, memorizing. When I finally awoke, it was with a start. My phone vibrated with a notification, but my vision was still blurry. I glanced around the car, and for the first time, I truly noticed him, not the polite driver, but the man behind the wheel, watching me, studying me, in a way that was far too personal. His smile was gone, replaced with a look of quiet calculation, almost predatory. "You're awake," he said softly, voice calm. "I wanted to see how you slept." I froze. My stomach dropped. "What?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Why would you watch me sleep?" He tilted his head slightly, as if considering my question. Most people never notice. Most people are too busy worrying about their phones, their work, their little lives. But you're interesting, relaxed, vulnerable. Sleeping is revealing. It shows more than people realize. A chill ran down my spine. I felt violated, exposed in a way that no one should ever feel. I tried to keep my composure, to sound normal, but the words stuck in my throat. The city outside the tinted windows seemed distant, unreal. I was trapped in this car, entirely at the mercy of this stranger who had chosen not to drive me safely home first, but to watch me while I slept. I attempted to move, to change seats, but he subtly blocked the door with his arm, his movements casual, almost friendly. "No need to be nervous," he said. "I'm not gonna hurt you. I just like observing. The word echoed in my mind like a warning I couldn't ignore. It wasn't about safety or travel, it was about control. He was studying me, learning me, cataloging every gesture, every breath, every unconscious movement. My pulse quickened, and I realized how little power I had. I was a passenger, literally and figuratively, completely under his gaze. The ride continued, but I couldn't look at him directly. Every glance in the rear view mirror reminded me of his presence, the unbroken focus he had on me. I tried to occupy my mind with anything: my phone, counting streetlights, humming a song, but the knowledge of being watched made it impossible to relax. Every nerve in my body was alert, and exhaustion only made the fear worse. Finally, we reached my apartment complex. I fumbled with my bag, trying to gather courage to leave. The driver didn't rush or speak. He simply waited, still observing, still cataloging, until I finally opened the door. I bolted out, heart hammering, and slammed it behind me. I wanted to believe it was over, that he would drive away and disappear into the night. But even after I was inside my apartment, I couldn't shake the memory of his gaze. It was invasive, intimate, and utterly inescapable. I kept imagining him leaning forward slightly, eyes following my every move, smiling quietly to himself as he remembered how I slept. Sleep didn't come that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the weight of his presence, imagined him observing, taking mental notes of my fear, my reactions, my vulnerabilities. The experience wasn't physical harm, it was psychological, intimate, terrifying in its subtlety. In the days that followed, I avoided ride shares entirely. I installed additional locks, stayed vigilant when leaving home, and began taking taxis with visible drivers only. But the sense of being watched lingered. It never fully went away. The memory of those hours, trapped in the back seat, exhausted and powerless, haunted me. I would catch shadows in my apartment, sounds I couldn't explain, and immediately jump, half expecting him to be there, still observing, still studying. The scariest part was knowing that he had never even touched me. The horror wasn't physical. It was the understanding that someone could invade your private moments without consent, silently, watching, memorizing, and relishing the control it gave them. The Uber ride had seemed ordinary, normal, safe, but it had been anything but. Sometimes, I still feel it. The faint, invisible gaze that seems to follow me, especially when I'm tired or relaxed, when I let my guard down. The driver who watched me sleep didn't just take me home that night, he left a mark that never fades, a lingering terror that transforms ordinary rides into reminders that you are never truly alone. Even now, if I hear a car slowing outside my building, I tense. My pulse races. And for a brief, horrifying second, I imagine the same calm, quiet eyes watching me, calculating, observing, remembering everything. That ride was not just a late-night trip, it was a nightmare in disguise. An ordinary situation twisted into a violation of privacy and trust, leaving behind a fear that sleep itself can no longer erase.